So psychedelics are really having their moment in the sun, and this is the result of psychedelic-assisted therapy becoming more and more possible. In trying to pursue a medical model for using psychedelics, are we going to regulate away the very thing that makes psychedelics powerful and transformative? So there are three things that I want to talk about in this episode. I want to talk about the difference between a therapist and a guide. I want to talk about the quality of trust in the psychedelic experience and why I think that's really important for the transformation. And I also want to talk about the idea of apprenticing with psychedelics, not getting PhDs, not doing more Western certifications, but this idea of apprenticing with these substances that alter your state of consciousness. And the reason that I feel really passionate about this at the moment is because as I steer the channel more in the direction of trying to understand what consciousness is, what is the nature of our experience, not our lived experience, like the things that have happened to us, the content of our lives, but actual experience, what is it to even, why do we have a subjective experience? Anyway, as I sort of steer the channel more in that direction, I have been reaching out to guests to get them on the podcast and try and unpack some of these questions with me. People way smarter than me, neuroscientists, philosophers, physicists, authors of books about these topics. But what I've found is the people that are most interested and most enthusiastic about talking to me about consciousness are those who work with or around psychedelics. And I think that's really awesome and interesting. But what comes up a lot in the conversation around psychedelics is this potential, or not even potential, but this inevitability that we develop a model for using them as therapeutic tools. When I say the difference between a therapist and a guide, what I think a therapist is somebody who works with a patient in a one-to-one capacity, maybe 1-to-2, 1-to-3 if it's family therapy, that's besides the point, but somebody that works with a patient or a client in a private consultation whereby there is a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth about patterns and life events and personal history. And together they come up with a way to navigate the challenges that are a result of these past experiences. And I think therapy obviously goes deeper than just conversation. It's sometimes psychoeducation if the patient is ready for it. I think often these days in therapy, they use all kinds of different techniques and tools like EMDR, which don't use as much kind of linear conversation. But ultimately, it is kind of, talk therapy is a conversation. A guide is so different to that. A guide is, in a lot of traditions, particularly in parts of Central and South America and Africa, the guides are musicians. They are the ones that sit there and hold the container of the energy. They do blessings to the land, to the east, to the west, to the south, to the north, to the elements. And then, during the ceremony after the substance is served, there's just, everyone's just kind of sitting there in the energy and doing their own work. And then the guide is holding that space, offering some individual support, certainly not in a conversation back and forth kind of let's figure out this model and what happened to you in your childhood. When we bring this into the context of us here in the West, in places like America and the UK and Australia where I live, bringing about a medical model where we can use these psychedelics, it starts to look more like therapists using psychedelics in therapy. And I know that that's what it sounds like and that's what it is, but I'm not sure based on personal experience and research that works. What works for the experience is this idea of a guide, this idea of someone that can sit there for many hours, not just a 55-minute Medicare rebated session, but for 5 to 6 to 7 hours in whatever experience is unfolding without needing to fix problems, without needing to insert themselves, and whilst also knowing what the space needs to kind of shift whatever blockages might come up, right? So there's this British neuroscientist that I really like called Robert Carhart-Harris, and he has this idea of the entropic brain. And so what he's doing is he's taking a principle of physics or thermodynamics and entropy, which is a measure of disorder or uncertainty. Just to sort of understand what entropy is you could have like a deck of cards, and when the cards are new and in order, there's only one way that they can be. But when you shuffle them, there's like a million different possible ways in which the deck can fall, or the ways in which the deck can be organized, so to speak. And so when you are on psychedelics, there is this increase in entropy in the brain, which means that the brain becomes less ordered, less constrained, but in being less ordered and less constrained, it's more flexible. And therein lies the opportunity to create transformation and change. When you are in your normal waking life, you have a low entropy brain, like it's stable, predictable, controlled. You have repetitive patterns. Your body is tightly regulated by your brain, and you're efficient, and you can get done what you need to do. You can have a job and raise a family and stop at the stoplights and say hi to your neighbor, right? But when you are in, and that's low entropy. So when you're in high entropy, you're more flexible. And what happens is you have this default mode network, which is the network of brain regions that become active when you're thinking about yourself. This is what becomes entropic, right? So the part of the region of networks in your brain that are responsible for your sense of self, your sense of self across time, so like your life story, how you have integrated or made meaning from past events and what meaning you place on future events, all of the default mode network is responsible for all of that. Sometimes it's referred to as the ego. And so psychedelics push this default mode network into this state of entropy where there is a loosened structure, there is more possible connections that can be made, and less filtering, like less of the conditioning and the cultural the cultural narratives and conditioning that make us feel the way we feel about ourselves and contribute to us seeing ourselves in a certain way. There's less of that. And that's why these psychedelics work so well. It's kind of like the setting that says, don't go there, don't think about this, don't do this, don't make that connection, because right now everything's working and let's just keep doing it how we're doing it. That setting is switched off. And I'm not entirely sure if anyone knows how that works. Like, I'm sure there is like a somebody out there who's way smarter than I am, and knows the neurochemistry of that. And if that's you, send me an email, come on the podcast. But yeah, depending on what you believe about the nature of your consciousness, again, which is what I'm interested in, depending on what you believe about how your consciousness is connected to something beyond yourself, there is something that happens in the room. And that's, I think, the piece that the therapists need to get really good at. And it's often really unpredictable what happens. You can't program the psychedelic to give you a particular experience, no matter what you try. And really getting used to that energy and like trusting that uncertainty is actually part of the process, and being able to sit with the discomfort of that is really the important thing that needs to happen here. And at least like when I have had experiences, in more traditional style ceremonies using psychedelics, like that's really what the facilitators are doing, is they're holding the space and they are in full trust, because they are in full reverence of what these medicines can do. But I just don't think that that's something that you learn from a textbook, or something that you learn overnight, or something that you learn after one LSD trip at a festival. So yeah, I guess like also my question comes down to here around whether or not it is actually that specific quality of trust in the unknown and ability to sit with the uncertainty and discomfort that is what does the really profound healing in a facilitated psychedelic experience. Like that's what creates the transformation, almost like the level of trust that the facilitator can demonstrate when holding the container while the people around them are journeying, or while the person in front of them is journeying with substances that completely alter your consciousness and not in a way that you can pre-program. That is like learned. It's passed on passed on to the other people in the room, and it's like it's imprinted onto them, and then ultimately that's what they take out into the world. Because what so many of us struggle with, and the reason why so many of us are in therapy, is because we don't trust in life. We don't trust in uncertainty. Like, fear of the unknown is the cause of so much of our suffering. And the chronic suffering is what causes these conditions. And when I say chronic, I also mean like intergenerational. So again, like back to the whole, like, what is consciousness? Like, is your individual consciousness somehow connected to the consciousness of your lineage, and we know that humans are small objects. Like, I love this this idea, and it's from a physicist that I love, called Sarah Amari Walker, and she says that humans are small objects, and they are small comparatively to the objects in the world, but they are deep in time. So the amount of selection and time it has taken for you to be you, for you to have survived and manifested as you, is profound. And what travels along that thread? Like, obviously we have epigenetics that give us an idea of how DNA and biology is passed on, and genes can express in a certain way given the right environment, and that can be replicated across generations. But I don't know, I just wonder if there's something a little bit more mysterious about that too, like particularly around these patterns that form in the default mode network about our sense of self, and about the meaning that we attribute to things. So anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. But if you're interested in this stuff, you should definitely look up Sarah Amari Walker. And if you are Sarah Amari Walker, please get in touch with me. I would love to have you on the podcast. Anyway, okay, so when we look at how the Western medical model approaches these medicines, there isn't this like, let's just do it and we're all in it together and we're going to trust the process and see what happens approach. Like, there can't be. It's tightly regulated. It has to be as predictable as possible. And things have to be tested and controlled, and these tests and experiments have to be repeatable, and there's all these guardrails around like what you can and you can't do. And I wonder if in creating that certainty, I don't know if it will maybe detract from the quality of the part of the psychedelic experience that actually does the deep and permanent transformation. A question. The other thing too, the final point that I wanted to make is about an apprenticeship versus a bunch of study, like apprenticeship versus a master's degree and a PhD, or 10 clinical trials and 50 peer-reviewed papers published. I think that with the apprenticeship, the person who is serving the psychedelic is in deep relationship with that substance, not with the idea of that substance or the information that they have about that substance. They are in deep relationship with the experience of being altered on that substance, and that is what creates this trust. That is what builds the thing, that the quality that holds the container and facilitates change in people. And these apprenticeships are like long in other parts of the world where they work with plant medicines. Like, these apprenticeships, they're from when shamans are youths. They get selected and then they get taken through decades of apprenticeship and training, and they get put in positions where they have to there's mishaps and there's mistakes, and they have to experience those in order to learn. And I think that is a natural part of the process. And I am sure that anyone else who has worked in depth and long term with psychedelics or has like a deep interest in what they feel like and the experience that they produce will say that, yeah, there's mishaps. Like, that's an important part of learning about how to dance with altered consciousness is when things don't go well. And I don't think that that is what is being required of facilitators. And in fact, I'm sure that there's many psychedelic facilitators who are offering this service and have never had a psychedelic experience. So how are we going to manage this as this type of therapy becomes more accessible and as the medical model scales it? On one hand, we know that this is great. More people need access to this. And, those people that are very vulnerable should not be doing this at home by themselves or at festivals or at parties. They should be doing it in a space where it is safe and they are being looked after and cared for. And yet when we scale the model, does that mean that we risk regulating away the very thing that is going to make these journeys super transformative, which is what we want out of the psychedelic medicine? So how do we strike that balance? My question is really just around, is this being acknowledged? Is this being addressed? And then how? How is it being approached? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. I'll see you next week.